Good is going on the road this time, high speed. And who better to show this theme than a guy known for riding horses around? Which one, you ask? Well, the flavor of the day is Takeda Shingen. He's a 5-star rider and he's got a lot of catching up to do if he wants to stand out in this especially crowded year. Let's see if he's up to snuff. Each of Shingen's skills has a 6-turn cooldown, and you should keep this in mind because we're leading off with the Tiger of Kai. This is a 3-turn party attack buff that doubles as a targeted cooldown reduction effect. The typical issue with servants like this is that their cooldowns are balanced around them using CDR on themselves. The Okuni problem, in other words, which disincentivizes you from sending this resource to a second attacker. But Shingen tries to break this cycle, in his own way. If he's your team centerpiece, he can, with Koenskaya's help, fire off his skills on turns 1 and 3 without using this on himself. Remember that each Koenskaya of Light takes off 2 turns, and the natural turn progression will equal 6 turns by the time you hit wave 3, his natural cooldown length. Moreover, he can do this without any intervention from a Mystic Code, which hypothetically frees up that resource. There is a catch though. Your average rider isn't running around with a 100% battery, and Shingen is no exception. Crimson Flame is a personal buster buff and 50% battery. 50 is good for a buster servant, but it does mean that for single core applications, ones where Shingen does all the fighting, he can't use a 50% starting charge CE and have an unrestricted Mystic Code. What he can do is K-Scope loop with 2 coins in any MC. This would have been impressive like, 3 years ago? Unfortunately, K-Scope looping is a strategy that's mainly good for meat grinding. But at this point, you have 1,000 different ways to grind meat. That and using K-Scope is a big damage loss over other CE options, and for 90+, and especially 90++, you're at serious risk of falling short. Honestly, the best use I can think of for this is grinding QP doors, while also leveling your miscellaneous Mystic Codes. Not the greatest selling point. But what exactly would you be looping? That would be Furin Kazan. This is an AoE buster attack with a preemptive NP seal. It overcharges a single turn of a rainbow card type resist down. The fact that Shingen doesn't have any anti-buffs is a major hindrance in high-end farming. You'd have to provide some serious party support to make up for it. And while Shingen has some of this on paper with the targeted cooldown reduction and AoE debuff, I'm not really convinced he's multi-core material. There are specific servants that, prior to getting the 5th Append skill, sometimes want supplemental CDR from something besides the Atlas uniform, like Arquator Ash the Savior, in specific applications. But they have existing alternatives, and for other servants, Shingen's lack of party charge constrains his splashability. It's an awkward spot to be in. He's too clunky to work into dual attacker setups, and he's not deep enough as an attacker for endgame single-core farming. This leaves him to farm trivial content for the most part, but there is a silver lining. Shingen's 3rd skill, Unrivaled, doesn't fix any of these existing issues, but it does present a different possibility. It's a 3-hit invulnerability, NP gain, and small damage reduction effect. NP gain on a buster servant obviously doesn't help with farming at all, but it does work in content where carding is expected, like boss fights. And remember that Shingen's Noble Phantasm applies an NP seal, so you can buy time and sometimes counter breakbar mechanics where your enemies gain a full meter. In fights like this, being able to manually generate charge with his arts cards or mighty chains lets you stretch out your coin resources, and the invuln can keep him relatively healthy. That said, there are downsides. While AoE boss fights are a thing, they aren't nearly as common as single target checks. So your applications are inherently niche unless you shove him into a single target fight and just accept that his NP will be a smaller part of his game plan. The NP itself is a bit of a letdown since it both applies a debuff and only has that debuff last for a single turn, so it doesn't even ramp, forcing you to choose between applying it and using your 3rd natural buster card in chains. Kind of a pain. The other downside is that Shingen has no crit skills. He doesn't even have a throwaway passive. His only internal source of crit damage is Append 4, which every servant can get access to. Yikes. So your face card damage is going to be modest. But you know, having the option of mighty chaining for large amounts of charge, swapping to bust your brave chains, having a strong multi-turn protection effect, I can think of another piece of content where this is really good. The first 2/3 of that equation are First Hassan's bread and butter, and everyone loves him, right? And in this mode, having an AoE Noble Phantasm you can hard charge is good, and it doesn't even need to deal 1 billion damage with anti-buffs. That's right, Takeda Shingen is a badass at Grail fronts. Finally, I can muster some unambiguous praise for this guy. Say, when was JP's last Grail front? Oh, 2 years ago. And 2 weeks before Shingen released. Oops. Ultimately, Shingen's lack of specialist bonuses leaves him without a persistent niche aside from low-stakes farming, something that's the dominion of arts teams due to the ease of using the Jufu Castoria combo. He's not inherently bad in a vacuum, You look at his individual elements and think, yeah, these are things that a good servant has. But their sum total doesn't make him strong enough to be an ultra generalist. There are better or more convenient options for many of his applications, which is a bit of a shame. I think the biggest missed opportunity is turning Shingen's flavor into a compelling kit. I think instead of going for a generic, but not generic enough, good stuff package, they should have leaned more into his reputation for delivering devastating cavalry charges. They sort of dabbled in this element by making Shingen a looper, but they pulled back when it came time to show how the pressure of these repeated attacks would have a cumulative effect, weakening and then overwhelming his opposition. Instead of making his NP apply a single-turn rainbow debuff, they should have made it a longer-term debuff, or given him a ramping buff, something with persistence. Alternatively, if they wanted to make him do all his business in a single turn, some crit buffs or even hand manipulation would have made sense as a follow-up to his one-turn debuff. Speaking of flavor though, maybe you're wondering why Shingen has a fan as his main weapon. Well, a big part of the Takeda Shingen mythos is a particular incident where a certain warlord managed to poke a hole in Shingen's formation and charge straight into his tent. Kenshin had his spear, but Shingen, who wasn't expecting to get close and personal with anyone that day, only had his war fan, which was just there for shot calling. But it was made out of iron and consequently sturdy enough to keep him from receiving 50 stab wounds and becoming an honorary Briton. Shingen managed to parry long enough for his soldiers to get on Kenshin, and the latter was forced to disengage. And that's the story of how Takeda Shingen got stuck with a shitty little fan in every video game ever since. If you plan to forge ahead with Shingen, I do have some general recommendations. For his craft essence, you'll want a 50% starting charge option like first day of filming. Using this does require a backline charger swap, so you lose flexibility with your Mystic code, but realistically you wouldn't be K-scope farming anything important in the first place. Outside of farming, your ultimate target is Black Grail for raw damage, which you'd want for his potential challenge quest applications. Between those 2 points, Origin Bullet is a nice generic anti-gimmick option for riders due to its anti-caster damage and invuln pierce combo. For command codes, I'd say stick with crit damage. You're running Shingen with Koyanskaya in most situations, and this lets you get extra mileage out of her star dump. And obviously his main game plan calls for access to servants like Oberon and especially Koyanskaya of Light. So if you're missing either, getting them is your top priority. Good rule of thumb for most attackers, get your primary card type support plus Oberon. Thanks for watching, lads. Like if you found this video helpful, subscribe for more, and come watch me at twitch.tv/Finotaisen where I stream every week. This Friday I'll be playing Shanghai.exe, which is this Mega Man Battle Network meets Toho Project fan game. Saturday's Fate Extra CCC, and Sunday's gonna be the Grand Archer fights in FGO. Stop by and hang out. I'll see you there. Oh wait, I think it's pronounced Shanghai Exa, but whatever. No one calls it that. Except the Japanese.